I'm too blessed to be stressed. Any of you used that lately? You know, it's a weird saying. I mean, we know what it means, and in theory, we know that we should be, but at the same time, a lot of us live under a bunch of stress. And so we understand the blessing of God, but we also understand the stress of just being on this planet, right? So I hope that you've already taken the little 10-question thing and filled that out. I'm going to address that with you in a few moments, so you can do that. But, you know, we say I'm too blessed to be stressed on the outside. But on the inside, I don't know that that's always true. I mean, the blessing is true. The not being stressed about it is not always true, right? I mean, we are mentally stressed. We're financially depressed. We're emotionally oppressed. Our family's under distress, and we are physically obsessed. So there's a lot of stress going on in our lives. I mean, just think through all those little things. One of those things is stressing you out right now. So what do we do with that? All we do is we cry, help, help. Where is my help? Where does my help come from, the psalmist would say. In Psalm 46, we're going to find out a little bit more about how can I handle the stress in my life. Psalm 46, we're going to walk through this short psalm together and just see what the Lord has to tell us today. God is our refuge and strength, a helper who is always found in times of trouble. God is our refuge and strength. He is. Do we always turn to Him? No. Do we always go to Him first about it? No. We don't do that. A refuge basically means a place to trust. A place in which you can put your trust. So if we're mentally stressed and we're financially depressed and we're physically obsessed and all these other things, if that's true for us and they're stressing us out, we need to take a moment and think about that. We need to think about what is stressing me out. And we need to ask ourselves, how am I trying to handle this stress? The psalmist is dealing with this. He's not just saying a truth. He's dealing with some stuff, just like we do. And I don't think sometimes we read it that way. We read the Bible at arm's length. When God wants to have a conversation with you. And in reading His Word, He's speaking to you. And in prayer, you can talk to Him also. That's why it's a conversation. It should be a dialogue. It shouldn't be, well, I read my 3 chapters today. I'm glad I'm done with that. Let's get on with life. I mean, that's not the way that works. In the same way that we don't like one-word answers to in-depth questions from family members. You know, well, how was it? It was good. Well, how was this last week, how was the week? Oh, yeah, it was good. Okay, I need more words. I need more words than that. Okay, I'll let you have 24 hours to sleep on it, and then I need more words, right? What's going on with that? And so, reading the Bible, relating to God is a similar situation. He's speaking to you. You get to have a conversation with Him. So, when you look then in verse 2 and 3, it says, therefore, we will not be afraid. This is a choice. This is a choice. When you get stressed out, anxiety rises. As anxiety rises, fear wants to walk in behind. And the devil wants you to be afraid of whatever it is that's stressing you out. The devil wants you then to start believing in the anxiety and the fear that you have so that you stop trusting in God. He doesn't want you to trust in God. He wants you to try to trust in yourself. He wants you to believe in yourself, not in God. He wants you to believe the lie that you can't overcome the shame of your past. Both things isolate you from the family of God and from God. I said this week to a few of them, I said, pride and shame are two sides of the isolation coin. Because pride will say, I don't need you, and shame says, nobody needs me. And both things isolate you out. Your pride will say, I can do it, God, I don't need you. Shame says, God, I know you don't like me, so I'll just try to figure this out on my own. Neither are needed in our life. Both are going to harm us. And so it's a choice. Therefore, we won't be afraid. Even though the earth trembles and the mountains topple into the depths of the seas, though its waters roar and foam and the mountains quake with its turmoil. Let me ask you 3 questions to think about this before we move on. When you look at this and it says the earth trembles, let me ask you, what have you been trusting to hold you up? What have you been trusting to hold you up? Because, you know, I've been through an earthquake, and I don't know if you have, but I've been through an earthquake. And when the earth begins to shake under your feet, that is very, very weird. You know, because you assume that what you're standing on is going to hold you up. But when it starts to shake, or it starts to do other things, that really messes with your mind. So I begin to think about that. What have you been trusting in to hold you up? What happens if that's gone? What happens when it's gone? See, if you aren't trusting God to hold you up, everything else is going to fail at some point. And then what? And then what? What are you going to do then? That's the first question. The second question is about the mountains toppling. Who have you been trusting to never fall or fail? Social media has done one thing. It has certainly elevated the number of people being seen as failures. You fell. You made this choice. You made that choice. Boy, you did this and you did that. I've said it before, and I'll say I'm so glad social media wasn't around when I was in high school. Because I would have been the poster child for all the things. That's a stress in its own right. You know, I've got to cultivate, you know, all of that. And I've got to put all that together just right. And I've only got to show the best side of myself. Because what if people see the not so good side of me? What are they going to think then? Who have you been trusting to never fall? Who have you been trusting to never fail? If you were to walk outside and see a mountain, all of a sudden it just crumbles to the ground, is that not going to mess with your head? That is going to be disconcerting at best. And when that person that you've been holding in high esteem does something stupid, then what? Or they walk out of your life, then what? It's hard. And all those things and all those feelings start rolling in. And you have to ask yourself, am I going to accept being afraid, or am I going to choose not to be afraid in that moment? What have you been trying to control that is in chaos right now? When the waters roar and foam, what have you been trying to control that's just in chaos right now? And it's stressing you out. You've been able to control this. You've been able to handle all this situation. You've got your family just where you need it, or you've got your job right where you need it, or you've got your finances right where you need it, or all these. What is out of control that's just giving chaos into your life? See, what are we trusting in? See, we started and said God is our refuge. He is our place of trust. And yet sometimes it is the earth or the mountains or the seas, the things that we have counted on, we've trusted in, or we've wanted to control. What happens when those fall? And it's a very important thing for you to consider. So, thankfully, the psalmist gives us 4 reasons not to be afraid. 4 reasons you don't have to be afraid. Walk with me, verse 4. There is a river Its streams delight the city of God, the holy dwelling place of the Most High. God is within her. She will not be toppled. God will help her when the morning dawns. God is in the city. God is in the city. What he's talking about, God's in the city, what does that mean for me? It means that God is available. God's available. He can always be found. He's there. He's present. And in your chaos, in your stress, in your anxiety, in your fear, how can I not be afraid? Because when I begin to accept and believe that God is the only place of trust for me, He's my refuge, I can go to this and say, it's because God's available. God's not going to say, oh, clean up first and then come to me. Hey, get your life right and then come talk to me. No, in the middle of your mess, God will be present. In fact, I will say to you, in the middle of your mess is the best time for God to be with you. Because you're not going to find your way out on your own. It's going to take you recognizing God being your rest and your refuge in order for you to walk out of that moment. God is available if you will just trust Him. That's the truth of the gospel. The gospel is that whoever will believe, not some, whoever. We don't believe in, the ones that have already been chosen to believe. No, anybody who believes, whoever calls on the name of the Lord shall be saved. You have an option, you have an opportunity, you have a choice. As long as you have breath, you have a choice. And that choice could be to call on the name of the Lord. To say, God, I'm a sinner. I am stressed out. I don't know how to handle this. But your word says that you could be a place of trust. So God, maybe for the very first time, I trust that when your word says Jesus did everything necessary that I couldn't do, that I'm going to trust that that's right. So God, I trusted what Jesus did I couldn't do. Forgive me and rule me from here on out. And He's available for that. He's ready to do that. And some of you may just be filled with stress and anxiety, and you're a follower of Christ, but we get stressed out. And God is ready and available to receive you and help you. God is in the city. Verse 6, nations rage, kingdoms topple, the earth melts when he lifts his voice. God is also in control. God is in control. You ever wake up, go through your day, come home at night, and go, I don't know how God could be in control with the stuff I face today. I mean, that happens sometimes, if we're truthful. I mean, in our brain, we know it, but the experiences of our day suggest to us, and this is the devil suggesting to you, God's not in control. Look at what's going on. How could God be in control and this go on? God's in control. That's the thing we have to trust. God's in control. Nations are going to rise and fall. Peoples are going to rise and fall. Things are going to come and go. Evil's going to be a reality because we have free will and a choice to make. Evil is present. Things happen. Everything can go wrong. Nations rise and fall. But the one constant that we can always count on is this: God is in the city and God's in control. We have that as a truth in our heart. We can believe that. We can trust that. How can I not be afraid with everything going on in my life? Because God's in this city and God's in control. That's how we escape the fear. And the third one, verse 7. The Lord of armies is with us. The God of Jacob is our stronghold. And God is also with us. You say, well, didn't you just say that? Well, God's in this city. God's available. God is available. But for some of us today, we're so accustomed to the stress and anxiety, we keep God at arm's length. And we know He's there. We know He's capable. We know He's available. We know He's there. But still, something within us says, let's figure it out on our own. No, God is also with us. How do I not fear the stresses and anxieties of my day? Sometimes by the hour. Is because we come to this verse 7, and say, God is present with me. He's not far away. He is right with me. One of the last things Jesus said was, I'll never leave you and I won't forsake you. And what that basically means is He will be present with us and He won't betray us. How many of us have lived with betrayal in our lives? You know, He will not do that. He's going to be present with us. And that's very important for us to remember. And then the final one, God is also capable. Come, see the works of the Lord, who brings devastation on the earth. God is capable. He's capable. You can call on God. He can handle your mess. He can handle your stress. That's what God is capable of doing. I would suggest to you, you don't have to wait until you're at the end of your rope and suddenly realize, well, I can't do this. I would suggest to you on the way down, why don't you consider it? On the way down to the knot at the end of your rope, take a moment and consider this. God's capable. You don't have to get all the way to freak out mode before that. You can stop in the middle and go, wait a minute, I need to be mindful. Psalm 46:8. God is capable. He can help me. He's a place of trust. I can trust Him because He's available and He's capable and He's present with me. And God's in control of what's going on. He who makes wars cease throughout the earth. He shatters bows and cuts spears to pieces. He sets wagons ablaze. Look at verse 10. Stop your fighting and know that I'm God. Some of your translations will say, be still and know that I am God. So how do you reconcile those two things? What do you mean stop fighting? Stop fighting it. Just rest in God. Stop trying to fight it. Our kids, when they were really little, they would fight sleep. And if you're a parent, you know there's those years where they just fight sleep, they fight a nap. I'm too big for that, I'm not doing that. And even when they're really little, they will just fight it. And I would take one of them and I would pick them up and I would just bear hug. And they would squirm and they'd get out, and I would just hold tight. And I would just hold tight and just hold them close. And after a little bit, they stopped the fighting and they went off to sleep. They went into rest. I love that the CSB says, stop fighting it, because it reminds me of that. How often do we do that? God wants to capture us up in His arms. And we're fighting against it. I don't need you. I don't need you. I know I need you, but I don't need you. I know I need to release my stress to you, but I don't want to release my stress to you. I'm more mature than that. That's for everybody else. It's not for me. It's for all of us. Stop your fighting and just rest in the Lord. Just rest in the Lord. Just come before Him and just share the stress and the mess. And say, God, I trust you. I trust you. The Lord of armies is with us. The God of Jacob is our stronghold. What's your plan for reducing stress? Many of you, I hope, took this little quiz in your bulletin there, in your worship guide. Let me just share a couple things with you as a way of applying what we've talked about today. If you scored, I'm not asking you to raise your hand. I'm not asking you to raise your hand. I'm not asking you to respond. But if you scored a 1 through 8, you're coping pretty good. You're coping pretty well. But what happens if? What happens when? Just be mindful of that. You can 1 through 8, oh yeah, woohoo, yeah, man, I am doing awesome. That's great. Preacher said I'm doing good. You are, but the devil also knows you're trying to do real good too. So what happens when? Job thought he was doing really good until one day it all left. And he was left with 3 guys who showed up to tell him how bad he is. What happens? If you scored a 9 to 13, you're on the edge. You're on the edge, and this psalm is something you need to be aware of. Will you choose to believe God can be trusted in the middle of the things stressing you? And if you scored 14 or more, I need to see you at the altar. Now is the time. Whatever you've been doing isn't working. You are stressed out. You say, well, that's just a season of life. What if one season turns into 2? And 2 turns into 3? And then it's a year. And then it's a decade. And what happens then? Now is the time. Will you choose to trust in God? Will you choose to say, God, I will believe you are my refuge. You are my place of trust. I've been trusting in this or that or the other, but today I'm going to choose to trust in you. And it may be the first time you've ever chosen to trust in the Lord. And today may be the day of your salvation, when you recognize fully, I've been trying to do all these things to overcome all the bad, and I realize that's not what it's about. It's about recognizing I can't. God already did, and I want that to be true for me. And some of you, many of you, may just need to come to the realization that salvation was the beginning of the trust. It wasn't the end of it. Salvation wasn't a once and done thing. Yes, salvation is, but relating to God and relying on God, it's not over. You learn to rely on God. You've been born again. That's awesome. Now what? You're going to try to go out and face your day like you did before Christ? No. You've got a new life. We look at it differently. We can rely on God. He can be our refuge. He can be our rest. Stop fighting it and know that He can be trusted. This is important for your walk with Christ. To realize He has not left you out on your own. He hasn't said, okay, I saved you here, and hey, look forward to seeing you when you get here. No, He is with you every step of the journey, standing there, ready to help, weeping as He watches you stress out over things that you don't have to stress out about, being fearful about stuff that God is capable and present to help you with, but you keep Him at arm's length and say, no, I got it. And God's over there going, you don't got it. But He will not force you to trust Him. That's a choice you have. That's a risk. You got to take it to reap the rewards of the presence and the peace and the rest and the refuge of God. Have you trusted? Will you trust? What will you do with your stress today?